Today, Wake World Parts is bringing you the engine oil change and transmission oil change for your Ilmor engines. This can also be done with the GM Legacy Indmar engines. They also use these same transmissions in a lot of the years that they use. You will get into the V-drive systems and regular transmissions where it has a transmission separate and the V-drive separate. These ones are together, right? So you're going to have the V-drive and transmission into one unit. These are the same ones that Indmar will be using, but today we are doing the Ilmor engine and transmission. These two jobs are really easy to do, so this is going to be the beginning video for both the engine and transmission, but I will film these jobs separately. Today what we have is we have the Panther oil sucker. This is a 15 liter. The reason why I like the 15 liter is because I can do both the engine and the transmission together. I don't have to take it out, dump it, and go again. They do make a smaller version, but with these things taking 6 to 8 quarts, depending on your engine, this is the one that you really want to have. Then you're not getting in and out and doing constant dumping, right? So this one can actually be hooked up to an air compressor, or it has a manual pump tube. This is what I use. This is not the stock hose. I've actually extended it and I put a clear hose on here, which we'll go ahead and show you once we get in the boat as well. For the oil change, you're going to need your Ilmor oil filter MV8V-1021. You're going to need your wrench for your oil filter. You're going to need 2 adjustable end wrenches because it's just the easiest way to do this. I always use the correct tools, but for this one, it's just a lot simpler to do. It's a hose and it's quick to get off. The other thing you're going to need is 2 air fittings. The reason why I have a male thread and a female thread is because depending on the boat manufacturer, they will use a different type of connection on their hose from the drain tube. On Mastercrafts, you're going to use a male. On some of the Indmars and other versions of the oil tube, you will use a female because on their end, it's going to be a male end. So for your Mastercraft, you will be using the male end. As you can see, it doesn't matter which one I use because it's not actually being used for air. It's being used to suck out the oil. The reason why I like these tubes is, one, it's clear. Even though this one's clear, I like to see what I'm sucking out and how it's working. Once we go in there and hook this up, once you screw this into the hose in the boat, this end will go into this tube, which will then suck out all the oil. Normally what I'll be doing is while I'm sucking out the oil, I'll be removing my oil filter as well as removing my transmission filter because I want to get as much done as quickly as possible. That is my job as a technician. Once I get that done, as you can see, this hose has been extended. The one that it'll come with will only be about this long. It's going to be really short. I've extended it because all I have to do now is remove this tube, and this tube will go into the transmission. The oil sucker will come with about 4 different hoses. One of them is really small, so like for the V-drives, where you have to pull the little dipstick out and suck the oil from in it, that little tiny tube will actually go down inside of there, making it a lot easier to get the oil out. And then you'll get all those tubes with this Panther, which will be on my website. So once again, you'll use MV8V-1021 for the oil filter, your 2 adjustable end wrenches, your oil filter wrench, and also the 2 air compressor fittings. For your transmission, you're going to need the transmission filter MV8V-1173. For this one, the only thing you're going to need is a 6mm wrench, or whatever you have. If you have a socket kit, whatever you want to use, right? So I have an Allen key, right? So I'm going to use a 6mm Allen key. And then there's a procedure to this. This isn't something that you just tighten down and you're done. There is a procedure because the bolt is not actually going into the transmission. It's only going into the cap of the lid that holds the filter in place. So there is a tightening procedure, which we will go over once we get in the boat. Today we're working on an Ilmor 6000 GDI 6.2 liter. We're doing the oil change first. So here is your oil filter. There is your dipstick. And you're going to need to look for this hose because normally it's around this area, right? So this is the hose that you want to be looking for. So hopefully it has this little clip that'll be hanging on somewhere. And this is what you're looking for when you're trying to find your oil hose. From there, you can come up here. You're also going to see here's your oil cap. So you would remove your oil cap. set that down. As you can see, I have rags down, or these are oil pads, and I don't want to set anything down on the customer's upholstery. I'm pretty sure as an owner as well, you wouldn't want to do that. So always set something down. I have my oil sucker ready. As you can see, it fits in here, so it's not on the seat decking or flooring. And we're going to go ahead and get this started. We're going to start with the oil change first on the engine, and then we'll go into the transmission. So to get started, what we want to do is, as I showed, we're going to remove the oil cap first, set it down. We'll go ahead and remove the oil dipstick next. One thing I want to do is I want to look at this dipstick. I want to see how bad the oil is, if there's any water in it or anything. This is still pretty gold, but as you can see, someone overfilled this really bad. So whoever serviced this boat last pretty much overfilled it. So you don't want to do that. So what we have here is, you probably won't be able to see it very clearly, but there is a bunch of cross lines. There's also a dotted line that goes across here, and it says full. Well, you don't want to go above the full. So whoever filled this up overfilled it. So one of the things you have to remember is, when you're sucking the oil out, you're going to suck the oil out. Sometimes it says that, let's just say this is 6 quarts. It's 6 quarts. Well, you may only suck out 5. Well, if you suck out 5 and it doesn't read on the dipstick, that's probably because there's still oil in the pan and the dipstick isn't touching all the way. So you're going to remove 5 and then you're going to add 6. You're actually overfilling the engine. What you're doing is you're going to make it harder on the engine to run. So it's going to lose horsepower and torque because you're forcing the engine internally to basically work harder. It's like if you had turkey dinner and decided you were going to go run a marathon. It's probably not going to happen. So the same thing like this, there is a full line on here, which you will want to make sure you go to. So we're going to fill it with probably 4.5 to 5 quarts, and then we're going to let it sit. We'll check it, then we're going to run it. After it runs, let the oil sit, and then we're going to come back and double check this. Okay, so we removed that. Now we're going to go for our oil line for the drain tube. Sorry, I'm going to get the drain tube off of here. And now here's where your 2 end wrenches come in. Like I said, it just makes it easier because I can just come in here and push them together. We're going to go ahead and remove that. And as I stated, this is a female end hose, so I need my male end adapter. This is the other reason why I like my adjustable end wrenches, because I don't have to change from one wrench to another or grab more tools. I can just come in here, and you want to give it a little bit of a tightening, because what will happen is if you don't tighten it, then you're going to get an air gap between the threads, and it's going to take you longer to suck the oil. Now we'll go ahead and take my tube here, going to remove it, and then push it onto here, like that. On this valve has to be closed like that. If it's going along the same path as the air compressor fitting, then it's going to be open. So this is closed. You only open this if you hook it up to an airline. But because we're saying we're out in the middle of nowhere or the boat's out on my dock, I need to be able to do this. I don't have an air compressor. That needs to be closed. Now I'm going to pump it a few times. Okay, so you can clearly see I've got oil going through my tube. It's black, everything's black. So what I can do now is I'm gonna take my funnel, I'm gonna go put it on the fill tube for the oil. I'm gonna get my wrench, and you can normally break this free first. When you're filming a video, sometimes you skip a few things. Holy cow. And you wanna make sure that you open this. So one of the things you can do is open it a little bit. What that's going to do is it's going to allow the oil that's in there to drain out because you want it to kind of go back in. If you try to pull this off right away, you're going to spill oil everywhere. This is a drain spout. So like if you do spill oil, it will drain from there. If you don't trust yourself, you can do this, and then that will protect it from pouring oil all into your bilge. So what I want to do is loosen this, and you can normally loosen this first. I should have loosened it first because then while I'm doing everything else, I know that's kind of draining back into the engine right now. Now, as I stated, I'd be doing the transmission as well, but for the video, we want to be focused on simply the oil change first. So now while it's doing that, I'm going to take this filter, and then you want to be quick. So once it's off, I know this tube's in my way, but once it's off, I just want to kind of grab it and flip it over, okay? So then that way I don't spill any oil. Then the next thing you want to make sure of, you want to make sure this gasket is on this filter. If it is not, you will stack two of these on there, and what will happen is you're going to spray oil everywhere when you start the engine. It will literally just spray it, dump all the oil out of the engine, and then you're going to blow up the engine. So always make sure that that gasket comes off with the oil filter. I didn't spill any, but as I said, you can put a rag down there just in case if you're not sure what's going to happen. Next, you always take a little bit of oil, lubricate it. It just makes it easier when you go to do your next oil change. So as you can see, I didn't crank that down. I can turn this more if I wanted to, see? And I can keep turning it. That's not the goal. The gasket's like this thick. So as I put pressure down, it's pushing it out, making it instead of, well, this one's not a circle, but we'll just say a circle. As I push it out, it's squishing it. Well, as I squish it, it's actually pushing pressure back up at the same time. It doesn't need to be crazy tight. Put it on there too tight, it's going to be impossible to get off. And then when I'm all done, I'll show you, but I will date the oil filter. Now, all I can do is wait for the oil to be sucked out. Once again, this is where a lot of the time gets burnt. That's why I try to be efficient and empty out the transmission at the same time. So there we go. Now you can hear the machine. That means there's no more oil in the engine, so now it's trying to suck air. It's basically telling you that it's all done. We're going to go ahead and disconnect this and move on to the transmission oil. Now that we've gotten all the oil out of the engine, we're going to go ahead and remove this tube. Make sure that that doesn't fall and drain oil. I'm going to then take this and put this right back on my oil sucker because I don't want oil going anywhere. So for now, I'm just going to put this back on. We're now going to go ahead and remove this fitting. And go ahead and screw back on the plug so oil doesn't come out. As you can see, it's easier to do this that fast because I don't have to change my tools. It doesn't have to be over tightened. It doesn't need Hercules to install it. Done. Put that there. Now that we've finished the transmission filter and transmission oil, we're going to go back into the engine. Right now with the engine, this is 7 quarts, roughly 7 quarts. So what I'm going to do is I put about 6 quarts in it right now. And then I've let it sit while I've been doing this. So I filled it, I put oil in here, about 6 quarts. I got my filter on, I got everything back together. And now what I'm gonna do is insert the dipstick and check where my oil level is. So you never wanna overfill your oil. You wanna make sure that you start lower, because once again, the engine can retain some oil within it. So thinking that you've sucked out all 7 quarts and adding 7 quarts, you could be overfilling the engine. So with 6 quarts in, I'm going to go ahead and pull the dipstick and check it. And as you can see, I am almost touching the fill line here. I'm really, really close to where it needs to be full. So once again, saying 7 quarts, or even 6.5, or even if your engine says 5 quarts, I really don't care what the quarts is. You normally want to go about 1 quart to 1/2 quart less than what the engine requires when you're starting. Now, once I run it, as I stated, the oil filter is going to have to fill with oil. It will retain oil because it is the oil filter. So it's going to have a paper filter in there, an element, and it's going to retain a lot of that oil within here. So once I run it, the oil level will go down. So I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes, let it rest. I'll pull that, check it again, and then add oil as necessary. And then once you're done running it on the hose, getting it up to temperature, let it sit, check it, and then you're all done with your oil change. After I change your oil, I like to come in and write a couple things on the oil filter. I'm going to write the date, and I'm going to write your hours. If I wanted, I can write the dealership. Oh, I got a little sloppy there. It's Cal Custom. And I can write my name. If you know you're good at your job, you'll always fill this out. Because if you did it right, you'll have no problem putting who did the work, when you did the work, and then also the hours helps just in case you forget to note it in the work order or give it to the customer. They now know when the last day they changed it and the last hour was. If you want to do the transmission, you can. It's a little trickier, but you can label that. And then it's 0.5 hours. And I'll come back up here and I'll put hours. And that's going to be your engine and transmission oil and filter change. Once again, I still have to run the engine, let it sit for 5 minutes, check the dipstick, and top off accordingly. Do not just put 7 quarts in an engine because it says 7 quarts. You want to make sure that you do not overfill the engine, or all you're going to do is make it work harder. And it's going to take longer for it to get up to speed or get you out of the hole, especially if you're in Tahoe in California, you're up in those high altitudes. The harder that engine has to work, the harder it is for you to get on plane. So make sure you're always double checking your oil levels before and after you're done changing the oil. For your oil change in your Indmar Raptor engines, you will find the drain tube on the driver's side, starboard side of the engine, and also it is a cartridge, not an oil filter. So you have to take this off to get the cartridge out. Your cartridge part number is SP501022S. And then if you want to use the correct tool, it's 1 inch and 7/16. You'll drop it on there like that. Get your wrench, take it off. And this is because this is made out of plastic. If you start just using a random combination end wrench, or you use an open wrench, it's just going to start stripping this. So you want to make sure you use the right tool. This is a 12 point, so I'm going to guarantee that it's on there. And as you can see, there's hardly any play. That's rocking back and forth more than it's going side to side. You're going to twist this off. There's going to be 2 O-rings in here. that you're going to remove. It's going to come with new O-rings. You're going to install those, and then when you tighten it down, you just get it really nice and snug so it doesn't leak. And that's going to be for the Indmars, all of the Indmar 6.2 Raptor engines.